We're excited to welcome Olaf Carlson-Wee, who is the founder and CIO of Polychain Capital, as well as Tekin Salimi, who is a general partner at Polychain Capital.
Hey, Anna, thanks for having us.
Thank you, Anna.
So my first question is something that I think a lot of founders probably have on their mind as a first step to understanding how to pitch their open internet company to a venture capitalist. How does a pitch deck for a company building on the open internet differ from a traditional startup's pitch deck?
So I think for any founder that's thinking through how to structure their pitch deck for an open web startup or a DAO, which I'll use synonymously with open web startup in this conversation, a lot of the same elements are going to appear in the pitch deck as would in a traditional startup company. So in any case, investors are going to want to know the core thesis behind the project, a description of the product, who the team is behind the product, some analysis of the market size. And I think all of that will be kind of consistent across the two. Where things start to really differ is around kind of the financial or economic slides, as well as user growth strategy. So one way to think of this is in the Web 2 world or the traditional startup world, a pitch deck would sell kind of what the lifetime value of a customer would be or its LTV. It'll look at stats like the cost of user acquisition and kind of go to these basic business metrics to understand what are the unit economics of this business. Broadly, what's being done here is you're trying to convince investors that the ability to develop these network effects in your company are effective. And when you develop these network effects, you're actually going to monetize those effectively as a business. The typical VC model is companies raise a lot of VC money and then effectively give it away to early users as a way to subsidize those users to come onto this network. You can see this in many forms, such as referral fees to users, customer credits, discounts. Sometimes companies even give users cash directly. You could see that in the case of neobanks and fintech businesses. Now, flipping that to open web companies, you still have the same broad goal of developing network effects. But the interesting thing here is you actually don't need to give away VC money to incent users to a new platform. You can actually build a system which rewards and incentivizes early users in the protocol or DAO itself. And you do this through a crypto mechanism called liquidity mining. Early users that come to a new platform earn a form of equity in that platform. Imagine an eBay protocol where buyers and sellers, upon the completion of each transaction, actually mine a small amount of eBay equity. Or you can think of an Uber protocol where drivers mine equity after each ride is complete. One element where you think of this in the pitch deck is instead of convincing investors of a financial model, you're actually trying to convince them of a whole economic system that will drive value to all participants that come on board.
Where do you look when sourcing companies? Do you take warm and cold intros or look at accelerators, Twitter?
Sourcing in early stage venture is definitely more of an art than a science, I would say. It's a patchwork process of participating inside these early stage crypto communities, talking to entrepreneurs that we know, talking to developers that we know who are building a lot of these software systems, and really just cobbling together all that information to try to come up with a vision of the future and figure out who's building that.
In a post-COVID world, we obviously would previously spend a lot of time at technical conferences in the crypto and broader tech industry. It was a great way to meet founders and early companies. Having to adapt to travel restrictions, we do spend a lot of time in kind of community channels on Discord, community channels on Telegram, using Twitter as a way to source new projects. We actually recently funded a seed stage company called Capsule that we discovered through a tweet.
What's the biggest mistake a founder could make when pitching to a crypto fund?
I think a big mistake is not adequately explaining how the system works. So saying, for example, I want to build a social media application on a blockchain, that might sound great, but the question is, how does it work? And really diving into those detailed mechanics about how you prevent spam, how you incentivize moderation. If you don't adequately explain how the system works, ideas are easy to come up with. it's very hard to execute them properly. So I think in specifically open web services, it's important to have a very detailed description of the mechanisms that allow the application to work properly.
When you go to a Y Combinator demo day, you'll notice that every single pitch deck has a slide about the company's total addressable market. Some blockchain projects have the potential to completely upend the architecture of the internet and redesign networks and business models that are not hindered by demographics or geography. How should open internet founders explain TAM?
I think a great historical example here is when you look at applications like Uber or Airbnb, it was easy in the early days to say the TAM of Uber is the largest taxi company, or the TAM of Airbnb is the largest hotel business. But in fact, that was massively underestimating the true size of that market. Because those businesses enabled new behaviors that were sort of unprecedented, they actually expanded the size of the market as we know it today.
Smart venture deals are mutually beneficial for the VC and the startup. When closing a deal with an investor, the size of the check is not the only thing on an entrepreneur's mind. Before making a deal, founders assess how well the VC can guide them on company building and what doors to industry connections the investor may be able to open for them. So when structuring out the cap table, should a blockchain startup seek funding from a variety of traditional and institutional and blockchain investors, or should they only seek funding from the VCs that specialize in blockchain?
If you are an early stage founder in crypto, you absolutely need to partner with crypto people. A lot of generalist venture capital groups are interested in this area, but simply lack the expertise, lack the network of people in this area, don't understand the market dynamics, and don't understand the desires of the end users. Especially the earlier you are, the more important it is to partner with people who deeply understand crypto market dynamics, the average desire of the end crypto user. It's a little bit like biotech, perhaps, in that way. You don't see a lot of generalist venture groups doing crypto with, say, 10% of the capital in a generalist fund.
In efforts to scale fast, startups are known to deploy large portions of capital into sales, marketing, and customer acquisition early on. Have you observed that capital deployment priorities are different for the open internet startups that you back?
One of the big differences is that you can programmatically, with code, codify in a very formal manner your customer acquisition incentives in an open internet startup. Tekin mentioned earlier this concept of liquidity mining, whereby an open internet service effectively gives up ownership units of the service in exchange for user acquisition. This is a pretty common pattern in the launch of these open internet services, where they incentivize users with ownership units of the open internet service in exchange for adding liquidity to the platform or using the platform in some capacity. This is a little different than the kind of social media marketing or growth hacking that you would see in a more typical Web 2.0 startup, but it's conceptually similar. The economics are similar. However, you can execute it in a much more scalable way with code rather than having to sort of go out on a day-to-day basis and run sort of a consumer acquisition marketing campaign.
For seed stage companies, hiring the wrong person can kill your startup. How do you advise your portfolio in making their first hires?
Every hire you make in an early stage startup is going to go out and hire 5 more people. So early hires have a lot of leverage on what the sort of culture and makeup of that organization looks like. This means that hiring a really, really good person will be amplified with the people that from their network that they bring into the business. Early hires in startups are very, very hard, and you have to get it 100% right. There's actually no easy answer there. The main thing is that even if you are under crushing stress and an insane amount of work, you cannot cut corners there. Regardless of if it's a good outcome or a bad outcome, it will be amplified massively as the company grows. So even if you are under, working way too long of hours and working really hard as an early stage founder, this is one area that you genuinely cannot cut corners. You have to find the right early people. At that point, those people will help you find the next 10, so to speak. But those first 3 or 4 hires, they really are going to be sort of the cultural paradigm and attitude of the entire future of the business.
When it comes to the co-founder dynamic too, would you rather invest in a super technical product CEO or maybe a veteran company builder CEO who's exited a company before, or kind of a mix of those two things, like a co-founder duo?
Yeah, we like hardcore product architects, engineers, protocol designers, more than your veritable MBAs. Yeah, we would much rather have businesses run by product architects than business people.
I want to talk about one topic that's likely on the top of every entrepreneur's mind, the exit. So in Silicon Valley, tech CEOs are idolized. We write books and movies about the founders who started billion-dollar companies from their garage in Palo Alto or their dorm room at Harvard. The narrative arc follows fundraising and all the drama of company building through the moment that a CEO rings the bell at the public debut. Exits in crypto have been rare so far, and crypto companies have a much higher likelihood of seeing liquidity before traditional startups do. We understand a startup's life cycle as launching with TechCrunch coverage, raising 4 rounds of capital, buying office space in San Francisco, and expanding until they sell to Google or take the company public. How does the concept of liquidity translate to decentralized startups? So can blockchain founders dream of the fame and fortune akin to that of Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, or Travis Kalanick? How is the story of the exit different in the crypto sector?
We see the fastest growth in crypto to kind of these billion-dollar valuations for applications that we've ever seen in the world. And individual developers in the crypto space have the most leverage to create value and build things that any developer in any category has ever had. So I think the mechanics are quite different, in that the logic of crypto is that you have to give away what you've created in order to make it valuable. If one person owned all the Bitcoins, Bitcoin would not be valuable at all. This is quite different than, for example, Amazon, where suppose Jeff Bezos owned 100% of Amazon, it would actually be very similarly valuable. And the service for the end user would not be different, right? In the case of open web services, the sort of ownership structure is intricately woven with the product experience itself and the continued development of that product experience. So the irony of crypto is that the more you give away, sort of the better of an outcome you will have. There's also this concept in crypto of this sort of anonymous founder. People can create open web services and never really reveal their identities and still have that web service be hugely successful. So that's obviously a massive divergence from the sort of attention from the media that more traditional startup founders may receive. But these are all of the different idiosyncrasies of the crypto space that give founders super high leverage, but also, alter the dynamics substantially from traditional startups.
One of the magic powers of crypto is obviously you can achieve liquidity very quickly on your system. And sometimes this means that you have something like a DAO that hasn't yet really found product market fit, but is already liquid and trading. DAOs are obviously much smaller on a market cap basis than traditional internet companies. But I think over time, as these platforms continue to grow and they're already liquid, we're going to see interesting new emergent behavior and potentially DAOs merging together. So you can kind of have a form of second liquidity event as an early backer of one of these platforms. So I do believe it'll look a little bit more like traditional web in M&A activity over time.
If a community eventually takes over to govern a decentralized company, how does equity translate back to the developers who built the tech and the entrepreneurs who scaled the company and the investors who believed in them when they led their Series A?
So I think fundamentally, this is kind of a question of understanding the equity value versus the future token value of a new platform being built. And our general conventional thinking on this is that the best approach when building an open internet service is to use the equity of the company and basically the business as a conduit to actually doing the engineering work and building out the platform. But over time, leading up to the launch of the DAO token, all value should ultimately accrue to that DAO token model. And in the future, after that launch, the equity is either entirely dissolved and the business is dissolved, it moves to effectively an internet sovereign corporation, or the equity remains in place and the company still exists, but basically just takes a perfunctory role of updating the UI, UX, managing the code base and pushing updates through, but not really capturing economic value. So I think it's important for investors to understand this is a new paradigm and one that liquidity and exits look a little bit different than traditional web investing. But if done correctly, the tokens of these new platforms can be incredibly valuable.
Is there any lasting advice that you have for entrepreneurs who are building on open internet structure that would make you say, all right, I'm ready to write a check?
Think from first principles about how you could enable a new type of behavior that's sort of unprecedented, but uniquely made possible through the characteristics of one of these open web platforms. Once you have that concept, that is the core first strategic thing you have to do. And the second is basically just build a prototype and see if you can make it crudely work. The whole crypto space is amazing because once you have one of these ideas and you launch it out into the wild, it's sort of out of your hands and it can grow way beyond what you personally are capable of doing. Taking, say, Bitcoin as the classic example, it is way beyond, at this point, the creator's vision or ideas of what it could be. It really became about giving ownership to the community of users who then sort of define what Bitcoin means. So there is this sort of reverse logic. It's not of control and ownership. It's about decentralization and distribution. And the more you can sort of embrace that kind of native Web3 mindset, I think the more successful you'll be as an entrepreneur in this area. Crypto tends to reward radical ideas. And I think there is no limit to the potential of what could be built here. And just in general, I would encourage prospective entrepreneurs to think very big about what is possible. We really have upended the traditional logic of finance and the internet, and it is now possible in a really high leverage way to codify human sort of behavioral and organizational patterns in ways that are totally unprecedented and are sometimes sort of running wild beyond what we ever thought they could be. So I think that, this is the highest leverage time in the world to be a crypto developer. And I do think that crypto developers right now have more leverage than any engineer in any category ever has had. So I think it's a very exciting time, in short, to be a builder here. And I think everyone will be surprised by what is possible 5 years from now.
Olaf, Tekin, thanks so much for joining us. This has been really fascinating and I'm sure very informative for startups who may be considering building their technology on an open internet infrastructure or who are already there and looking to fundraise. So thanks so much, and we're excited to follow the success of the Polychain portfolio.
Thank you for having us.